Mötley Crüe would dominate the 80s, having all 5 of their albums during that decade going platinum. They would conclude that decade with the biggest album of their career, 1989's Dr. Feelgood, which was a fresh start for the band, considering many of the members had just battled severe substance abuse issues and were clean out of rehab. But the subsequent years proved to be turbulent for the group as they were dealing with changing musical trends and infighting. The band would return in 1994 with their self-titled album, a record that time seems to have forgotten. It would also be their worst performing of their career up until this point, and their only album without frontman Vince Neil. Some have even referred to the record as Mötley Crue's grunge album. In today's video, let's talk about Mötley Crue's self-titled record. Following the hugely successful album 1989's Dr. Feelgood, Mötley Crüe would reassemble by the early 90s to begin work on their long-anticipated follow-up. But by February of 1992, it was announced that frontman Vince Neil was out of the group. Depending on who you ask, he either was fired or left by his own accord. Here's what he told Dennis Miller shortly after his exit was announced.
I don't know how are you guys going on without you?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, it came to complete shock to me, and
just happened a few days ago?
Yeah, just actually 2 days after my birthday. It's like, happy birthday, Vince.
Jesus.
Yeah, but hey, that's okay.
Well, I don't understand now. What's the vote? Did y'all come in at the same time so everybody has an equal vote? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, the way we had the band going was like everybody had 25% input in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so 75% voted me out. And I was the 25% that...
See, it's weird for little kids all across America to hear business considerations with Mötley Crüe, because, you know, they think you and Tommy just hang off the roofs together at night.
Well, you know, they're great guys. You know, they just had to do what they felt they had to do. And
this seems real risky to me, though, because really you seem pretty interwoven into the fabric of that band. Do they have any idea who they're going to replace you with? Not David Lee Roth, for God's sake.
You never know. You really never know.
His ex-bandmates, however, would issue a statement following Neil's departure that the frontman was done with rock and roll and instead pursuing his real love, racing and golf. In the book The Dirt, bassist Nikki Sixx would claim the decision to part ways with the frontman was made on February 10th, 1992, in the middle of a rainstorm in Los Angeles. At the time, Sixx, Tommy Lee, as well as Mick Mars waited anxiously in a rehearsal space for Neil to arrive. Sixx would write, "Except for Mick, we were all slipping off the wagon, but Vince was the only one who was letting it affect his work. By the time he arrived, the seed was already planted in our minds that he was holding us back." He would add in a separate interview that Neil wanted to also reap the benefits of being in a huge band, while the other members did most of the work. Shortly after his firing, Neil would file a $10 million lawsuit against his ex-bandmates, claiming the firing hurt his career, and he was also trying to get a portion of the band's future earnings. The timing of the split really couldn't have come at a much worse time, as Mötley Crüe was reported to have signed anywhere between a $20 million and $35 million deal with their label Elektra. Despite Neil leaving the band, their label Elektra, as well as the rock press, still believed that Mötley Crüe would have enormous success without the frontman. The LA Times would interview an editor for Rip magazine who would be quoted as saying, "To me, it's obvious that Mötley Crüe is likely to do better because bassist Nikki Sixx is responsible for all the lyrics and co-wrote most of their music. Other than having the experience of being a frontman for an arena-level act, Vince isn't that much of a proven talent." And this was a sentiment that was echoed by others in the press who likened the whole situation to when Van Halen parted ways with David Lee Roth by the mid-80s. In 1993, Neil would come back with his first solo record titled Exposed. While doing press for the album, he spoke to the LA Times where he would clear the air on a few items, claiming he hadn't in fact given up rock and roll for racing, and that he wanted to stay in Mötley Crüe, but he would claim it was a difference of opinion musically that led to the split, stating, "I wanted the band to continue on a straight hard rock direction, but they wanted to go in a blues direction. We've been rehearsing for a few months, but we didn't do any recording. It just wasn't sounding good to me. I'm not a blues singer and Mötley is a rock band, not a blues band. I think it's a stupid idea that will alienate the fans. I would have tried the blues thing and tried to put my own spin on it, but I never got the chance." Neil would also jump ship to a new record label, signing instead with Warner Brothers, leaving Mötley Crüe's longtime home Elektra. As for changing musical trends, Neil wasn't a fan of grunge either, revealing in the same interview that he still listens to the stuff he grew up on like Deep Purple and classic rock. He would claim it's hard to make out what a lot of the Seattle bands are even singing about, and he disagreed about groups taking political and social stands, since he was a firm believer in rock music being an escape from everyday life. Neil would end up beating his former bandmates with releasing new music, putting out his solo record titled Exposed in 1993. It would end up going platinum, and he also nabbed a spot on the soundtrack for the movie Encino Man, and even toured with Van Halen. As for what his former bandmates thought of his first solo record, guitarist Mick Mars would tell his Santa Rosa paper, and I quote, about a 1 on a scale of 1 to 10. Vince's ex-bandmates would soon audition replacement singers, with former Skid Row frontman Sebastian Bach claiming that he was considered for the role. Bassist Nikki Sixx would tell a Wisconsin paper that the band initially contemplated calling it a day once Neil left, but he would admit to Spin magazine that at the time he was listening to a hard rock band from LA called The Scream. Their frontman John Corabi ended up seeing the interview and tried to get in touch with Mötley Crüe, and soon enough an audition was set up. Funny enough, Corabi would admit to the Arizona Daily Star that he didn't initially think he was a good replacement for Neil, since his singing voice wasn't that similar. He'd also admit that he wasn't a huge fan of Mötley Crüe's music, but he would reveal how his attitude soon changed after he jammed with the group's members, adding, "We just jammed on Helter Skelter, ran through Jailhouse Rock, and I picked up a guitar and things just started falling into place." After just 3 jam sessions, the band would assemble their first song, titled Misunderstood, which would appear on Mötley Crüe's subsequent record. The fact that Corabi played guitar in addition to harp and could play bass and drums only added to his appeal. Mötley Crüe would also credit the dismissal of Neil as allowing the band to write more relatable songs that dealt with harder subject matter, claiming that all the band's past songs about women and partying were Neil's forte. Drummer Tommy Lee would tell an interviewer, "John doesn't play guitar in every song, but most of the ones he does frees up Mick to go berserk." Released in March of 1994 and produced by Bob Rock, who did Dr. Feelgood, the group's new album came out nearly half a decade since their last release. The music scene had drastically changed. Soundgarden at the time had the #1 album in the country, while Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots were also some of the more popular groups at the time. The resulting album, as one critic put it, was like Metallica meeting Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. The band's publicist at the time would call the new Mötley Crüe sound meaner, fatter, and closer to the street, while others claimed the band's sound was more bluesy and more in line with groups like Cinderella and Aerosmith instead of Rat and Poison. The new Mötley Crüe album would have a message to critics in the sleeve that would read, "We don't understand the people who put us down. They're intimidated by it." The new Mötley Crüe also claimed to be less party animals than their past years and more sober, but Corabi would admit in an interview with Full in Bloom that the members weren't exactly sober during the recording of their self-titled album. The band, in addition to getting rid of Vince, also lost the umlaut in their name. While the band tried to stymie any reporters who asked questions about their ex-frontman Vince Neil, they still took digs at him when they could, like this example when they appeared on MTV.
Did they care when their former bandmates sustained several broken ribs and internal injuries while jet skiing a few weeks ago?
My heart goes out to you. What happened to the coral reef?
Oh, man. Hey, when 300 pounds of blubber land on a coral reef, you know there was some dust flying around.
You're invited, but I weigh a ton.
Oh, okay, here we go, great. Now you know that's going to be run.
As for Corabi's feelings towards Neil, he would tell the Arizona Daily Star, "I don't mean any disrespect to him, but I've always been more of a fan of Steven Tyler and Paul Rodgers." The album would end up peaking at #7 on the Billboard album charts, and the record soon fell off, only going gold. All previous records from the band went platinum, and they had a few singles from the record, including Hooligan's Holiday and Misunderstood, that would chart. The tour to support Mötley Crüe's self-titled album also saw the band downsizing, playing smaller venues that only seated a few thousand people when years prior they were playing to tens of thousands. But ticket sales were also slow, and their longtime fans were turned off by the band's new sound. MTV would also give the band less attention. It seemed like only years later some fans have rediscovered the album. Bassist Nikki Sixx, however, responded at the time saying, "Careers aren't based only on being on the top, careers are based on a roller coaster concept." Following the release of that album, Neil couldn't help himself but gloat, first shooting down rumors that he was rejoining the band, telling an Alabama paper, "Within a month I had a hit with You're Invited but Your Friend Can't Come. I put a new band together. My first album sold 1 million copies. Their record didn't make 100,000. Adding, "We're carrying on the Mötley Crüe sound because Mötley Crüe sure isn't doing it anymore." Mötley Crüe's new songs would be more political, social, and thoughtful, with Power of the Music taking aim at politicians for trying to control the music people buy, while Welcome to the Numb and Droppin' Like Flies highlight a growing apathetic society. Uncle Jack is Corabi's attack on an abusive uncle, while Misunderstood and Till Death Do Us Part speaks of Nikki Sixx's mistakes in his life. According to the Tennessean, the first 1 million copies of their self-titled record contained an order form for a 5-song project called Quaternary, with each member of the band contributing a song without assistance from the other members. Mötley Crüe soon got to work on their second album with Corabi, but things wouldn't work out. Corabi would claim years later that Mötley Crüe's self-titled record rattled his former bandmates' confidence when it came to recording its follow-up. Originally titled Personality No. 9, Corabi would claim a changing musical landscape that gave rise to heavier groups like Marilyn Manson, Nine Inch Nails, Rob Zombie, Ministry, and Pantera led to Mötley Crüe trying to follow in their footsteps. The band, wanting to shake things up, also fired their longtime manager and hired Alan Kovac, who at this point was well known for revitalizing bands' careers. Mötley Crüe would re-enlist Bob Rock to produce their follow-up album, but he was eventually let go as he was too expensive and they thought he was overproducing their music. So they soon brought in an inexperienced producer in Scott Humphrey, with Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee also co-producing the album. But the changes in the group and the people around them resulted in Corabi getting frustrated and also getting mixed signals in the studio, telling Rob's School of Music, "To be perfectly honest with you, I think they were panicked. It was the first time for Tommy and Nikki to actually really produce a record. They really didn't know what they wanted. They gave me these random bands, like Nikki Sixx would say something on the lines of Manic Street Preachers and old David Bowie, and then Scott would go Cheap Trick, and then Tommy would go, no dude, like heavy like Pantera, but lush like Oasis." And I'm sitting there going, half of these bands I've never heard of before. In 1996, there were also reports that Neil was going to be coming back to the band. There was even talks of the band recording an album with 2 frontmen and touring with both Corabi and Neil. The band's manager would speak to the LA Times in 1996 and state, "John Corabi is still in the band and we're all really hoping it will work out with both. We saw what happened with Van Halen," they would add. Ultimately, Corabi was let go. It was the band's label that ultimately forced him out, with him telling an interviewer that the major deal Mötley Crüe signed before he joined the group resulted in the label wanting him gone and wanting Neil back in. The resulting album, 1997's Generation Swine, initially had Corabi's vocals on them, but Neil returned to the group and Mötley Crüe would have to retool the songs to fit Neil's voice. The album would end up being a commercial disappointment, and the members of Mötley Crüe don't really count themselves fans of the album either. Since leaving the band, Corabi would go on to form the band Union with Bruce Kulick of Kiss fame. I've actually done a whole video on Union's career, the link is down below. He'd also go on to play on albums by Nikki Sixx, Eric Singer, as well as Rat, and would front the group The Dead Daisies. He's also released an autobiography. It was in 2016 Sixx gave an interview to Swedish rock magazine and talked about why he hates Mötley Crüe's self-titled record, revealing, "I think it was a very unfocused record. It was painful for me because John Corabi can't write lyrics, and I had to do all that work. It was the first time I ever had to work with somebody that wanted to participate in the lyrics, and my standard is so high that it was so hard. It took months. Usually I write a set of lyrics in an hour." Corabi thinks the fallout with Sixx happened when he was doing an interview and was asked about Nikki Sixx's book, The Heroin Diaries. And while Corabi praised the book, he said that he also owned it but claimed that the book might not be entirely true. Corabi claimed he got an angry email from Sixx a few months later. Fast forward to 2022 and Corabi would be interviewed by Eddie, I Know Everybody in that band Trunk, and he asked the former frontman if he could see himself ever rejoining Mötley Crüe, to which he responded, "No, I can absolutely certifiably tell you there is zero chance of that ever happening until Nikki and I could sit down at a table and have a cup of coffee and chew the fat. Just whatever, it's never going to happen." He would add that Tommy Lee has since reached out to him and even talks to Mick Mars every now and then, but the issue seems to lie with Nikki Sixx. Then the same year, John Corabi would reveal his son was dealing with a heroin addiction while appearing on the Chuck Shoot podcast. The musician claimed that he tried to reach out to both Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee to get advice on what he should do, but that he was disappointed that Nikki Sixx never responded to him and that Tommy Lee gave him a short response, which is simply rehab. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have suggestions for future topics, let me know in the comment section below. We'll see you again, Rock Most Stories. Take care.